Hello, my name is CJ, and I'm an active member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I want to talk a little bit about some of Nephi's early youth. Yeah, that's not what we're talking about in Come Follow Me this week. However, it's what I've been reading in my own personal study on top of Come Follow Me. I've been reading about Nephi. Understanding the beginning of the Book of Mormon, you need to read the first 20 chapters of Jeremiah. That's essentially what the you call the Book of Mormon prequel, if you will. And I find that there's three major sins going on. Three big ones that are just reiterated over and over and over again. The first one is rejection of the prophet. They've rejected Jeremiah. They've put him in prison. They've tried framing him. They've tried putting words in his mouth. Just terrible situation. On top of that, and even worse, is idol worship. They've rejected God in favor of false idols. And that's a big one too. And then kind of a sister one on top of that is they haven't been keeping the Sabbath day holy. So these three major sins have been reiterated over and over and over, and God's just fed up with it with the Israelites. And he says, I'm done with you. Pretty much, I'm done with you, and invasion is imminent. So we know what's going on with Jeremiah. Jeremiah's in prison. And first chapter or two of Book of Mormon, Lehi has his visions. And he starts calling repentance to the people. The people don't want to hear it. They've been hearing it from Jeremiah, probably hearing it from other prophets too. They don't want to hear it from Lehi. So God says, take your family and leave. Now. In the middle of the night. Drop everything you're doing, pack your food, pack your clothes, pack your tents, and bring some animals with you and get going. So what was that like the next morning? Lehi's gone. His house is there, his family's gone. Did the people care? Did they not care? So Nephi, he goes with them, and he's their youngest one at the time. So he's probably late teens, maybe early 20s by this point in time. Nephi wants to know if his dad's a prophet. His dad's having these visions, these dreams, and he made a pretty big claim. We need to leave right now in the middle of the night. God told me to do this. That probably tried everyone's faith. So Nephi wants to know what to do. Is my dad really a prophet? The Lord appears to him. Much like Joseph Smith, much like the prophet Samuel in the Old Testament, the Lord appeared to him, and he has his own vision and receives revelation from the Lord. One of the biggest promises he receives is, I will take you to the promised land. But that promise was like 10 plus years away. And Nephi had to go through a lot of stuff to get there. For example, as we'll discuss a little bit later on, he was almost killed by his brothers, and he was almost killed by Laban. He was tied up and left for dead on their way back to Jerusalem, or back to their father after having obtained Ishmael's family. He sees the promised land in vision. He's like, well, I've been promised it. Now I'm actually seeing it. I'm still not there. They were 8 years wandering in the wilderness. They couldn't have any fire. Their food was cold. This whole time he's thinking, the promised land is coming. The promised land is coming. The promised land is coming. He was constantly bullied and berated and picked on by his brothers. They didn't believe he could build a ship. He finally had to, stretch forth his hand and shock them. So they finally believed, hey, God's with me. On the ship, once he finally built it, he's harassed by his brothers. He's physically harassed. He's beaten up by them. And he's tied up. And we usually leave it at that. But what was that like? In the middle of a raging storm. He's tired. He's hungry. He's dehydrated. He's cold. He's bruised. He's blistered. He's probably defecating on himself, urinating on himself. He's in absolutely the worst situation. Borderline on his deathbed after probably 3 days. He's 2.5, 3 days. He's not doing well at all. And yet in the back of his mind, he has that promise. The promised land is coming. The promised land is coming. The promised land is coming. So that's later on in his life. Move back to hey, you need to go get the brass plates. So shortly after he sees the Lord, Lehi says, hey, I need you guys to go get the plates. And Laban and Lemuel start complaining. Well, Nephi's like, you know what? I got this. I just spoke with the Lord. I know for a fact that Jesus Christ is real. I know that you, Father, are a prophet. So, yeah, let's go get those plates. I know God's going to provide that for us. It wasn't an issue of maybe or possibly or what are the odds. He knew it. So, get their stuff together, and they go back, him and his brothers. Now, what do you think Jerusalem was like? How long had they been gone? A couple of days, a couple of weeks? Were the people shocked to see Laman, Lemuel, Sam, and Nephi? Or did they just blend in with the crowd entirely? What was it like going back there? Did they talk to friends? Did they talk to family? Or did they stay focused on the mission completely? Concerning the mission, getting the plates, this was simply a matter of trial and error. We're going to keep doing this until we succeed. I know we're going to get the plates. I don't know how, but I know that we are. So, first attempt. How about one of us go simply ask Laban for the plates? The lot fell on Laban. Laban said, yeah, I don't think so. Get out of here. Accused him of being a robber. Like, well, that didn't work. What now? Well, attempt 2. We got a lot of gold, a lot of silver. All of our possessions are still at the house. Why don't we go buy the plates from Laban? Now think about this. They're going there for brass plates, for the scriptural and spiritual value. But they came to Laban with, as the scriptures tell us, much gold and much silver. So they were giving him a lot more value than the plates were physically worth. They're like, hey, we want those brass plates, that's it. Laban says, I got a better idea. How about I take your gold and I take your silver and you guys can leave. And oh, by the way, let me just try to have you killed in the process. So they're running out of there. And that's a failed attempt, right? And then what happens? Laman and Lemuel snap. Now, I'm not advocating for them, and I'm not saying it's okay, because what they did was certainly not okay. However, look at everything they just went through. We know for a fact that they already were murmuring. They don't believe their dad's a prophet. So that just tells you the mentality that they're in. And things just kind of went bad to worse. They had to leave their house in the middle of the night. They're tired, they're angry, they're frustrated. They did not want to move. And they certainly didn't want to leave their house and Jerusalem and the city to go in the wilderness. To go from everything to nothing. They left their friends, possibly family members behind. Trekking into the wilderness. Okay, here we are. Thanks, Dad. Oh, wait, you want us to go back to Jerusalem? Really? They had to go back. They didn't want to go on that trip anyway. They're very jealous and very angry at Nephi. And it's very similar to Joseph of Egypt and his angry and jealous brothers. They don't like taking orders from Nephi. They failed in the last 2 attempts. Laban wouldn't give them the plates. Laban wouldn't let them buy the plates from him. It wasn't happening. So they completely snapped. And they start beating the snot out of Nephi. It says they beat him with a rod, and that's all the scripture says. Well, how long? I doubt they hit him once. I doubt they hit him twice. It took an angel of God to show up and say, stop. Stop right now. So why did an angel appear? A couple of reasons why. First of all, Lehi was a prophet. And as such, he had special favor, divine favor, if you will. Nephi, a future prophet, also had divine favor. Nephi had exercised faith. I know God won't give us a commandment that he won't allow us to fulfill. Laman and Lemuel were going to kill their brother, or at least leave him for dead, and that certainly would not have fulfilled the plan. So an angel comes, tells them to stop, and it's pretty much the only way to get Laman and Lemuel to get back in line and say, okay, we're going to do this. Nephi didn't need to see an angel. He already knew the angel was coming, or he already knew that they were going to be redeemed. This was more for Laman and Lemuel. So it's assumed the angel heals Nephi, and they all go back to Jerusalem. So they return to the outskirts of Jerusalem, and the not-so-faith, or the barely get-by faith of Laman and Lemuel is present. Hey, guess what? We're at Jerusalem. We're done. Your turn, God. Nephi's probably looking at his brothers like, really? This is what I have to deal with? You just saw an angel, and you guys are going to sit down and give up? Fine. He says, I'll do this. Because God has asked us to do it, and I'm going to go do it if you won't. So he sneaks into the city. And what does he find? Laban. Passed out, drunk. This is the guy that tried to kill them, took their gold, took their silver, took their property. Nephi could have been vindictive and just, killed him right there and then. But that's not Nephi. He didn't want to kill Laban. He was done with Laban. He just wanted to get the plates and get out of Jerusalem. That's all he cared about. Spirit says, no, you need to kill him. And he's like, I don't know. I've never killed a person. So the Spirit says it's better that one man perish than an entire nation perish in unbelief. So let's think back a little bit. We know the people were angry with Lehi, and the reason he had to leave was so they didn't kill him. But were the people angry enough to follow Lehi into the wilderness, or were they just done? Well, Lehi's gone, he ran away, whatever, big deal. But his kids are back. And they've tried to get the place from Laban a handful of times, and it hasn't happened. So what if Nephi had just put on his clothes instead and went and got the plates? Laban would have come to out of his drunken stupor, and we know he could command at least 50 people, at least 50 soldiers, so he probably would have led a hunting party into the wilderness to track down Nephi and his brothers, and possibly even Lehi while they were in the process. And knowing the personalities of Laman and Lemuel, it's quite likely that if they had been captured, Laban and Lemuel possibly would have made a deal with Laban to say, hey, this is where our dad is. You let us go, you restore us, and we will turn in our father. Viewed in that light, it's almost a necessity that Laban had to die. So Nephi says, okay. He cuts off his head. We don't know if he was commanded to cut off his head or if that was just the first thing that came to him. Now this had to be really hard for him, really awkward, because he's never killed a person. That's a very bloody... He killed him. He chopped his head off. So there was obviously blood coming out, spouting out. It was probably a very bloody situation. And then what does he do? Takes his clothes off. That had to be an awkward situation for anyone to stumble upon. Laban cut off, his head's cut off, and he's naked. So Nephi, this was probably very awkward for Nephi. He's like, I didn't expect this. I just saw an angel of God not even 2 or 3 hours ago. And now here I am, killing a man. There's blood everywhere. I stripped him naked, and I'm in his clothes. Nephi knew that God would provide a way for them to get the plates. But Nephi had no idea the situations that he was going to have to go through to get there. And he's still not done yet. So here it is in the middle of the night. Laban has no head. He's taking his clothes off, and he's walking to the treasury. And he convinces Zoram to give him the plates. Hey, I need the plates right now. Zoram thinks that he's Laban. Yeah, sure, why not? Get you the plates. Oh, and by the way, it's the middle of the night. Follow me. He couldn't leave any witnesses behind. So, they go out to the outskirts, and Laban and Lemuel are like, oh my gosh, Laban's here. He knows where we are. Quick, take off. And then Nephi's like, no, wait, it's me, hold on. Zoram's like, it's you, what's going on? What happened to Laban? Well, the only way you got his clothes on is if he must be dead or something of the like. So Zoram takes off. And then there's a scuffle between Nephi and Zoram. And Nephi gets the upper hand and says, hey, we can't let you go back. But I promise you, and he gives him an oath. He says, I promise not to hurt you, not to harm you, and you can be a free man. You won't be a slave. You won't be a servant if you come live with us in the wilderness. Zoram makes an oath. I promise to go with you. On a side note, when Zoram found out what had happened to Laban, you might say he had no choice. It was a good choice, but he had no choice. After he left with them, people would have quickly assumed that Zoram had killed Laban. His servant in the treasury is suddenly gone, and Laban has been killed, decapitated, and stripped naked. So he would have been public enemy number one. And I guess rumor and word of mouth would have got out, so possibly, oh, by the way, Lehi's kids were here, so you need to keep an eye out for them. So they had to leave. They had to flee. So they return back, and they get the plates. Nephi's probably thinking about this whole situation going back, 2-3 days, whatever, the day trip, thinking about everything that just happened. Returning to the city after leaving, realizing they're done with this city. And how his brothers treated him. Up until then, his brothers had probably just argued a lot and thrown a fit. Maybe he even got in a few fights with them. But this was a serious enough offense that an angel of God had to come and say, stop. And then in his obedience, he's like, in the last, 2 weeks, I've seen Jesus Christ. My brothers have almost killed me. An angel saved me. And I had to kill a man, strip him naked, and impersonate him in order to get the plates. At this point in time, I think Nephi's probably starting to get a grasp on the future that will be his as someone who's committed to following God. He will see the best of the best in his life, and he will also see the worst of the worst. Not that he will commit the worst, but he will see a lot of bad, ugly things happen to him as a result of his willingness to follow God at all costs. Okay, so they go back home, and Sariah is overjoyed. Her boys are alive. Yay! She's been complaining to Lehi. I'll bet Lehi's glad they're back. Sariah can finally just, calm down a little bit. But, his children are back. He's glad. And they got the plates. And he prophesies about the future of his posterity and how the plates will affect them. And then what? Hey, we're glad you're back. Guess what? You should go back to Jerusalem again. And this time get a wife. Get the children, get the family of Ishmael, because you guys need to take wives. So now they're probably really thinking things through. Now it's interesting because this is one of those situations where Laman and Lemuel don't complain. But I'm sure they had a family council of sorts, and they had to talk this over. And that probably included Zoram. Well, we know war is impending. Things are falling apart. They want to kill the prophets. Every prophecy by Jeremiah, and yourself, by the way, Lehi, says that things are headed south real quickly. Oh, by the way, we just killed Laban in a very gruesome manner. They're going to be looking for anyone with any information that may be attached to his murder. That's true, but God wants you to go back. Okay, so they go back, and this is the state of affairs in Jerusalem. Things must have been really, really touch and go. They had to be real careful who they talked to. I highly doubt that they were walking around in, broad daylight. Oh, hey, it's good to see you, Nephi, Sam, you guys are back. Laman, what's up? They probably kept to the shadows. They probably took the back roads. The roads less taken. So they finally talked to Ishmael and his family. And aside from any spiritual experiences Ishmael may have been having, Ishmael was probably, at the same time, very pragmatic and probably saw the writing on the wall. Like, Jerusalem is an absolute state of chaos, very apostate. invasion is imminent. Yeah, I'll take my family and get out, and I will go just as quickly with you as you guys did in the middle of the night. So they take their families and they go. And then Laman and Lemuel start complaining again. It's a pattern with them. And they've got some of Ishmael's sons on board. And they're like, you know what? Forget this. We don't want to do this. We're going to go back to Jerusalem. We miss our homes. We miss our friends and our family. We miss our luxuries. We're going back. Nephi's like, no, don't. And they say, we don't want to hear it. And they beat him up and tie him up and leave him for dead. Now Nephi's in a situation where he's like, well, the angel isn't appearing, and I'm not going to expect an angel every time something bad happens. So his prayer becomes one of both common sense and desperation. Dear God, and this all happened probably in like a matter of seconds. This particular situation does not coincide with the commandments you have for both of our families to leave Jerusalem, travel into the wilderness, and eventually make it to the promised land. You've promised me the promised land, and this obviously isn't it. I can't be left for dead right now because my life's mission obviously is not over. And oh, by the way, if I stay here, I'm going to die of starvation and or animals will eat me. Therefore, in the name of Jesus Christ and according to my faith and your promises, I need to be delivered. Please help me. Give me the strength I need to break free of these bands. And that's what happens. Once again, Nephi's faith takes place. He thinks about the promises he's been given and the miracles he just saw that completely changed his life. That these ropes were like, really? They have nothing on me compared to the power of God. So he goes back to his brothers. His brothers are probably pretty shocked. And everyone who is not pro tying up Nephi talks the brothers down. They say, hey, we're sorry. They ask for forgiveness. Forgiveness is given. And they go back. They go back and then Lehi has his vision. Nephi sees the same thing that his father has, and it's a different video. Well, immediately after those two visions, is when the marriages take place. Now, my question is, was it a group marriage? Was it like 4 or 5 marriages at once, Zoram and the sons of Lehi and the daughters of Ishmael? Or was it an intermittent ongoing thing, as one daughter and one son fell in love? It's irrelevant, just a question though. How old was Nephi's wife? Nephi, we know, was the youngest at the time of his siblings. Jacob and Joseph still hadn't been born yet. It's assumed they hadn't been born yet. Oh, or no, we know they hadn't been born yet. If Nephi was in his late teens, early 20s, when they moved out of Jerusalem, went for the plates, and finally left Jerusalem completely, then it's assumed that he married one of the younger daughters of Ishmael, just in practical terms. Furthermore, culturally speaking, it would have been really awkward for an older woman to marry a younger man, particularly one as young as Nephi. Which means realistically, probably when Nephi and his wife first met, she was probably a young teenager, 13, 14, 15-ish. And he was probably between 17 and 24 years old. So there was probably a good 5 to 10 year gap between them, which isn't a big deal. Just at their time in life when they met, she was probably pretty young. But we don't know exactly how old they were and when they got married. But they got married and then they moved off into the wilderness, and that is a different video. So, food for thought concerning Nephi, his early life, and the experiences that really grew and solidified his faith.